Random thoughts. In this video, I'm going to read parts of C.W. Hobley's book, Bantu Beliefs and Magic. And in these parts, he tells us, or he explains or describes a religious practice that both the AGIKUYU and the Luhya, the people we call the Luhya today, that's not what they were called then, the religious practices or some of the things they did as a way to commemorate that they came from the north. Now, C.W. Hobley was a British colonial administrator, and he came to Kenya in the 1890s, and he was brought to East Africa by the Imperial British East Africa Company, and then later on he stopped working for them, and he started working for the British government as an administrator. And he became a provisional commissioner of the part we know today as Western Kenya, that is Nyanza and Western Kenya and parts of the Rift Valley. And we've gone through another document that he wrote, and the document is about the people of Eastern Uganda. That region was called Eastern Uganda then. Now, and of course, it's because of the time he spent there, we could assume that that's how he ended up recognizing the similarities of this practice among the Luhya people and the Agikuyu people. Now, this book I'm reading is about the beliefs of the Agikuyu and the Akamba people. The Luhyas are not mentioned so often. In fact, this is the only place I've come to where he mentions them. And we are going to read that. And before I do that, I need to mention this. I have done a video before where I've said that the Akikuyu came from the north. At least that's what they say, and you'll hear so many people saying that among the Akikuyu especially, that they came from the north. And this is contrary to the common belief that maybe they came from the east or they came from the west or from the south, because the south and the east and the west seems to be like the most probable directions from where they came from. And that's because there's, of course, the general belief that the Akikuyu came from West Africa, like most of the Bantu speakers. Of course, when they say they come from the north, of course, it is still open. It is still possible that actually they came from West Africa. It's still open because it's possible they came from the west, went to the north, and then came southward. So I'm not saying that conclusively they did not come from the west. It's hard to tell. But going by this practice, it leaves you wondering, why did they choose to just focus on the north? If they came from the west, they would have also considered the west, maybe more than the north. Even if they left the west, went to the north, and then came to the south, then the west should still have remained to be the direction that they focus more on than the north. Now, this is what he says. Now, in this part of the book, Hobley is describing to us the establishment of the village altar. Now, the Akikuyu, and I've said this in another video, both the Akikuyu and the Akamba, and I'm thinking most likely the Luhya people, they had two types of altars. There was the altar where they would sacrifice to Ngai, and there was the altar where they would sacrifice to the spirits of the departed, the ancestors. Now, the altar to sacrifice, or that was used to sacrifice for Ngai, was usually a huge tree. Of course, often it is a mugumo or a mukuyu. In the Akamba, they were called the itembo. But for the spirits of the departed, it usually was an altar that was built at the village, at the homestead. Now, that's what he's describing here. He's telling us about how the altar of the Akikuyu, the village altar, where they will sacrifice to the departed spirits, how it was established. That's what he discusses here. And it's out of that that then he mentions about the building of that altar was done in such a way that it included a component of the north. And he says that that symbolized that they came from the north. And the Luhya had a similar thing, a similar altar built in the homestead, and it also had a component of the north. We are going to read those two parts. This is what he says. It's more than two parts, actually. He says, when the Akikuyu people found a new village, the elder of the family collects 3 stones, 2 being brought from the bed of a river to the north of the village, the direction from which the tribe migrated, and 1 from the river to the south of the village. The river in the north is generally the Thika, and the river in the south is generally the Mbagathi. Now, of course, this depends on where he was located when he was collecting this info. He continues to say, of course, this can create the impression that maybe if you went past the river thicker, then the direction will change. But that is going to become a little bit difficult when you read about the exact same thing about the Luhya people. He continues to say, the stones must not be collected from a river from which the villagers take water for their domestic use, and it must also be a river with a perennial flow, meaning it should not be a seasonal river, and it should also not be a river from where the villagers or the homestead collects water for domestic use. So those were two conditions or three conditions. It should not be a seasonal river, it should be a river to the north, and another one, of course, to the south, and it should be a river that is not seasonal river. Now, he tells us now about more about these stones, specifically how they looked and how they are set. He says, these stones usually weigh from 30 to 40 pounds and are used as village shrine. Having obtained the stones, the people take a black ram, sew up its eye, and bury it in the middle of the village. Now, before the stones are set, they will take a black ram, then sew one of its eyes, and that has a meaning, and then it is buried in the middle of the village. This is done with the idea that if anyone comes to bring bad magic to the people of the village, he will, like the ram, lose the sight of one eye. So the altar basically was meant to protect the new homestead, the village as he calls it. The 3 stones are then planted around the spot where the ram is buried. 4 people carry out this ceremony: the head of the village, another elder of the same clan, and 2 senior wives of the village head. I'm thinking this is a homestead and not really a village as he describes it. This is more likely a homestead of one person, and when he's doing this, he needs to have an elder from the same clan, meaning the person from his same clan, come to help, and also, of course, the head of the family, and 2 of his wives. He continues to say, whenever a sacrifice is made in the village in connection with any ceremony, the ram is killed near this spot, and blood and fat are poured into the ground between the stones. So now when it is set up, the altar is set up. Now every time they want sacrifice, they will bring a ram and it will be killed, and then blood will be poured, of course, between the stones, and also, of course, the fat, which I said. This book makes you understand why Christians from the Kikuyu land are so fascinated with oil. There is this fascination or need to use oil for blessings, for all kinds of things. Seems like it comes from, of course, the culture before. Meat for the spirits is always put out in 2 heaps, and one for the male and one for the female spirits. So among the Kikuyu, seems like they used to honor both male and female spirits, which means male and female ancestors. It is believed that if the stones are obtained from strong flowing river, they will help to protect the village from nocturnal thieves. So the strength of the river from which the rock or the stones are collected will determine how potent that altar is going to be. Now, him saying about depending on which river, of course, says that it wasn't just one particular river. The rivers for 2 stones had to be to the north, and for 1 stone it had to be to the south of the homestead. He continues to say, moreover, the stones from the rivers to the north of the village will stop the entrance of bad ngoma or spirits coming from that direction. Similarly, the stones from the south will form a protection against evil spirits from that direction. So those are the beliefs, so some of the beliefs that were tied to the building of that altar using these stones. Then he tells us the sacred stones are called Kithangona ya Mushi, which may be interpreted as village shrine or altar. Now he tells us about a similar practice among the Luhya, and they are called the Bantu Kavirondo. Now, if you don't know who the Bantu Kavirondo are, the Bantu Kavirondo are all those people who are found around Lake Victoria, mostly excluding the Kisi and the Kuria. The people we know today as the Luhya people, they were called Bantu Kavirondo, while the Luo were called the Nailoti Kavirondo. So he says the same idea occurs in Bantu Kavirondo, where these stones are to be found in each village. Mumia pointed out such a shrine decked around with white feathers, where a fowl was periodically killed and the blood poured between the stones. So he said the same was found among the Luhya. But of course, there are a few differences. The Luhya will sacrifice a fowl. The Kikuyus never sacrifice fowl. They will sacrifice ram or sheep. He got more of this information from Mumia, the king of Wanga, of course. The stones were said to have come from the north of the Nzoia River, from the place whence the Wanga clan was supposed to have migrated. So just like the Akikuyu, the Luhya needed to collect the stones from the north, and it also had the same meaning, that it symbolizes the direction from which the people migrated southwards. Then he continues to say, if a Kikuyu village is moved, the stones are moved to the new village, a fresh ram being buried in the new spot. Before the stones are removed, the head of the village and his senior wife pour out honey beer and sugarcane beer on the space between the stones, which can then be removed with impunity. So these are sacrifices that needed to be done before moving the stones to a new village. Like if the people needed to move, they would move their altar. And then there was a process, of course, of moving these stones. It doesn't talk about the buried ram again. It looks like that is left there. The most important piece of it was the stones. Now, there's a part that it does not also explain, and it's a part of why did the new village need new rocks or new stones? But now they are moving the stones they had. Did it have to do with the head of the family breaking away from his father? I'm thinking that's possibly why. I'm thinking sons, maybe at some point when they were mature enough, they will break away from the homestead of their father. Maybe at that time, that's when they were needed to set up their own altar to get their own stones. And then from that point onwards, wherever they went or where they moved with the stones. Maybe. I'm not sure about that. When a brew of honey is made, a little of the honey is poured out between the stones. And when the beer is fermented, libation is also poured there. So they used to uh, do some sacrifices, we can say, was giving the spirit some alcohol, some beer and wine, and some meat when they sacrifice the rams. Yeah, so that's we can say some bit of evidence that the claim of the Akikuyu coming from the north, and also the Luhya actually do make these claims, same claims that they came from the north. So this is some bit of evidence that was collected by C.W. Hobley that the Akikuyu and also the Luhya people came from the north. Now, maybe there are people who know more about this, and I will be interested to hear about that in the comment section. Those are my random thoughts.